Now, we have been showing tabulation tables and summary tabulation tables for an example of a baseline survey. But we can do pretty much the same type of process when doing the analysis of monitoring data coming from an LQAS survey. And I would like to also show you the summary tabulation table for regular monitoring, which is slightly different from the summary tabulation for baseline. The only difference that you will notice is that there is an extra column at the very far right-hand side of the table that includes not only the average coverage, as we have seen before, but also the coverage target, that predetermined level that we have set ourselves as a project in order to obtain in a given period. Now, for this reason, since we have now an average coverage rate and also a coverage target, then we have two cells in the row that we're going to use for decision rules. So, for each of the supervision areas, we're going to still have the total number of correct responses. But then, underneath this row, we're going to have two cells per supervision area. The first cell will be used to indicate the decision rule for the average coverage, while the second cell will be used to indicate the decision rule based on the coverage target. Let's take a look at a numeric example to better understand the summary tabulation table for regular monitoring. As you can see in this particular example with numeric values for a summary tabulation table for monitoring, we have values of 13, 6, 9, 11, 5, and 5 that correspond to the total number of correct responses for this particular indicator, age of mother at first birth, per supervision area. With this information, we will be able to obtain the total number of correct responses in the program, and we should also be able to get the information of sample sizes per supervision area. Adding all these sample sizes, we will get the total sample size in the program, and then with these two parameters again, the total number of correct responses and the total sample size, we will be able to calculate the average coverage, which for this example is 43.75%. In addition, we have a coverage target of 50%, which is that predetermined level that we have set up in advance in order to achieve in a given period of time. So for this reason, since we have an average coverage now and a coverage target, we have two decision rules per supervision area. The first decision rule corresponds to the average coverage, while the second decision rule corresponds to the coverage target. It is in this way that for each supervision area, 1 through 6, we have two decision rule values. These are the values that will help us to classify which supervision areas are at the highest risk and which ones are not at risk. We're going to cover this particular analysis in the next lecture, but just to give you a quick intro, you see that in supervision areas 5 and 6 for this particular example, we have circled those correct responses, and we have also included an asterisk there. This is simply because these total number of correct responses both are below the average coverage and also below the coverage target, simply because you see that the decision rules are 6 and 7, while the total number of correct responses are 5. So for that reason, these two supervision areas should be our highest priority. But once again, we're going to take a closer look at this type of analysis in the next lecture. By doing the tabulation of data, we should be able to identify coverage rates for specific indicators for the entire program area. Therefore, we should be able to establish quantitative targets for specific indicators to be reached by the end of the project, as well as establishing targets for any particular period. And we could use LQAS to determine whether interventions are reaching coverage targets established for any particular period. So in the example that we're showing here in this particular slide, we have an average coverage found at baseline at 40.4%. And we have decided to establish a final coverage target of 75%. However, we have been able also to identify annual targets at the level of 50% for year 1, 55% for year 2, and 60% at year 3. Now, how do we get these targets defined? It includes additional information, and it also depends on the type of indicator that is being assessed. We're going to cover all these criteria in the next lecture on how to analyze results and those coverage targets included for specific periods of time. The tabulation of data will also let us classify results at the local level, that is at the supervision area level, as I was indicated when I was showing the summary tables before. Once data is completely tabulated, and once we obtain summary tables from the tabulation process, we should be able to identify which supervision areas will be our highest priority and which ones will not. The table shown in this slide should help us classify the priority status at the supervision area level, taking into account two parameters: coverage targets and average coverage rates. And we will be able to assess this priority status based on the number of correct responses and the decision rule values by supervision area. So, if a supervision area is below the coverage target and it's below the average coverage, then we should classify this supervision area with the highest priority status. We will take a closer look at this table in the next LQAS lecture, but we wanted to give you an intro of how we can classify supervision areas based on data collected through an LQAS survey. That brings us to the closing of our third online LQAS lecture. We take this opportunity to invite you and your colleagues based at headquarters or in the field to join us on March 9, 2006, when we will have a live interactive session on the Internet using the Illuminate tool. This live session will give you and your colleagues the opportunity to ask questions related to the contents of this third lecture, that is, the contents of criteria for defining supervision areas, and to go over again the process for tabulating data for assessing program results as well as assessing program monitoring results. We advise you that registration is required to attend this upcoming live session scheduled for Thursday, March 9th. You can register at the core group registration page on their website at the link provided in this slide. And we will start right on time as usual at 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. For recorded sessions and updated schedule of upcoming lectures, please visit the link at the bottom of this slide. Once again, on behalf of the M&E Working Group from CORE, thank you for your attention, and we look forward to talking to you live on the Internet on Thursday, March 9, 2006.